I'm Noah. 22, living alone in a third-floor apartment in a crumbling old building in the harbor city of Fairview, up on the Lake Erie coast. It's nothing fancy, flaking paint, groaning stairs, and if you lean just right over the railing, you can catch a glimpse of the water. I work part-time for a small courier company, lugging boxes around town. Not glamorous, but it covers rent and keeps my life uncomplicated. I like it that way, no boss breathing down my neck, no debts, no one to answer to. I've never been big on leaning on people. If something needs doing, I do it myself. I'm straightforward, maybe too blunt sometimes, but I'm the type who'd hand you my last dollar if you needed it. I've also got this bad habit. I park my battered old Civic wherever's closest, even if it blocks the walkway or the stairwell. It drives my neighbors nuts. They leave notes, knock on my door, or glare when we pass. I just apologize, move the car, and forget about it, until the next time I do it again. It's not on purpose, I just don't think about it until someone complains. That's how I met her, Mara from 3B right across the hall. She's about 40, lives alone, and mostly keeps to herself. I'd seen her around plenty, always neatly dressed, like she's heading somewhere important even if it's just to pick up groceries. Long dark hair pulled back, clean blouses, jeans that fit perfectly. She's beautiful but not the kind that tries to be. Word from Leo on the second floor was that she's divorced. She doesn't chat much, and when she does, it's clipped and to the point. At first I thought she was cold, maybe a little stuck up. The first real conversation we had was about my parking. I was dragging a flat-pack bookshelf up the stairs, muttering under my breath, when her door opened. She stepped out holding a small slip of paper, her handwriting so neat it could have been typed. "Noah," she said, calm but firm, "your car's blocking the walkway again. People need to get through." I set the shelf down, wiped the sweat from my forehead, and gave her a crooked smile. "Yeah, sorry. I'll move it in a minute." She didn't smile back, just handed me the note. "Please make it quick," she said and slipped back inside. I stared at her door thinking, great, another neighbor ready to nag me. But her voice hadn't been harsh, just precise. Still, I figured she was the type who'd never give me the time of day. A couple weeks later, Leo caught me in the parking lot. "Yo, Noah, you busy tomorrow night?" he asked, leaning against my car like it was his. "Buddy of mine's got a spot on a dinner cruise. Big boat, open bar, live music. You in?" A dinner cruise. It sounded like something for tourists and rich folks, not me. But I was bored and free drinks sounded good. "Yeah, sure. Why not?" "Perfect," he grinned. "Meet me at Pier 6. 6 o'clock sharp." The next evening, I threw on a clean shirt and my least worn jeans, then headed to the marina. The boat was bigger than I'd imagined, sleek, white, with string lights draped along the deck. Music spilled from hidden speakers. Laughter floated over the water. I stepped aboard feeling out of place but curious. That's when I saw her, Mara. She was leaning near the railing with a small group I didn't recognize. Her hair was loose, catching the lake breeze, and she wore a simple black dress. Our eyes met for the briefest moment. I nodded. She nodded back. No smile. No wave. Just that same cool distance. Of course she's here, I thought. Probably friends with the owner. I grabbed a beer and stuck close to Leo, trying to ignore her. The night started well. Clear skies, stars winking through the dark. The boat cut through the water smooth and steady while people danced and laughed over the music. I leaned against the bar, watching the scene. Mara stayed with her group, occasionally laughing but always a little apart, like she was there without really being there. I caught myself glancing at her once or twice, then forcing my eyes away. Not my type, I told myself. Too serious. Too old. Then the weather turned fast, like someone flipped a switch. One minute the lake was calm, the sky clear. The next, clouds rolled in low and heavy, the wind cutting sharp and cold. Rain started spitting down, stinging against my skin. At first, people laughed, thinking it would pass. But the boat began to buck under our feet, hard enough to send glasses sliding off tables and shattering on the deck. The music cut off and someone shouted about a storm warning. My gut tightened. This wasn't just a passing shower. Chaos broke loose. People shoved for life jackets, talking over the crews, shouted orders. I grabbed one from the pile, fumbling with the straps as the boat pitched again. That's when I spotted Mara. She was at the railing, calm but scanning the crowd like she was taking a head count. Our eyes met for a heartbeat, then the world tilted. A wave, huge and sudden, slammed over the deck, ice cold and crushing. I went down hard, my breath ripped away, water burning my throat. Screams cut through the roar of the wind, and then I was in the water, tumbling in the dark. The cold hit like a punch straight to the chest. I kicked, clawing upward, hands grasping at nothing until my fingers hooked onto something solid. A plank, maybe part of a table. I clung to it, gasping as the waves smashed against me. Lightning split the sky, each flash burning into my vision. My arms ached, my chest screamed, and everything started to blur. I thought of my apartment, my car, the stupid notes left on my door. Then everything went black. When I came to, I was coughing, throat raw, sand stuck to my lips. The sun blazed overhead, the sound of waves filling my ears. I was lying on a beach, sprawled like a washed-up rag doll. My clothes were soaked, my shoes gone. I tried to sit up, the world spinning, and that's when I saw her. Mara was a few yards away, crouched in the sand, stacking dry sticks into a neat little pyramid. Her hair was plastered to her neck, her blouse clinging to her frame, but she moved with quiet purpose. A sharp strike of flint and a spark caught. A curl of smoke rose. She didn't look at me until the fire flickered to life. Then she glanced over, her face calm, almost like she'd been waiting. "You're awake?" she said, her voice as steady as if we were back in the hallway at our building. I coughed, spat grit from my mouth and nodded. My head pounded, my eyes stung, but I was alive. That's when it hit me, she hadn't just washed up here like me. The way she looked at me, the lack of panic. "You pulled me out," I rasped. She didn't answer at first, just fed another stick to the fire. Then she gave a small nod, like it wasn't worth mentioning. "Couldn't let you drown," she said simply, and went back to work. I stared at her, the woman I'd thought was cold, distant, unreachable. She'd saved me. And we weren't even friends. The sun was merciless, blazing down on the empty beach like it wanted us gone. I scanned the shoreline, just sand, splintered bits of wood, and shredded bits of the boat. No people. No rescue. Just me and Mara. I tried to piece together the others from last night, Leo, the party crowd, but there was no sign of anyone. I pushed myself upright, every muscle screaming. My arms were raw with scratches, my shoulder throbbed like it had been slammed with a bat, and my throat burned. Mara crouched by the fire, poking at the coals, then handed me a coconut shell with a thin slosh of water inside. "Rainwater," she said. "Drink slow." I took it, my hands trembling, and sipped. It was barely enough to wet my mouth, but it was something. I nodded, unsure what to say. Thanks didn't feel like it came close. "We need to move," she said, getting to her feet and brushing sand from her knees. Her voice was steady, like she was reciting a recipe. "Water first. Then shelter. Then a signal." She pointed inland, where the trees thickened into a wall of green. "There's got to be a stream or something. We can't wait here." I rubbed my eyes, still groggy, my skull pounding. "Hold on," I said. "Shouldn't we check the island first? See if anyone else washed up? Maybe find a high point, look for a boat or something." It made perfect sense to me. Cover ground, look for others, figure out where we were. Not just play survivalist. Mara didn't flinch. She just met my gaze with those steady eyes. "We're alive now. Water keeps us that way for the next 12 hours. Wandering doesn't." Her tone wasn't sharp, but it still got under my skin. I pushed myself up, brushing sand off my jeans, heat creeping into my voice. "Don't tell me what to do. We don't even know where we are. What if someone's hurt out there? Or there's a way off this rock?" She crossed her arms. "Choose what keeps you breathing, Noah. Then we can play hero." It wasn't a challenge, just a fact, but it stung anyway. I clenched my jaw, grabbed a driftwood branch to use as a walking stick, and turned toward the jagged shoreline. "Fine. I'll check it out myself." I didn't look back to see if she followed. I was angry, mostly at the situation but also at her for acting like she had the rulebook to survival. The rocks were slick with seaweed, each step a slow gamble. I scanned for anything useful, food, bottles, a bag, a body. Nothing. Just the endless crash of waves and the distant cries of gulls. Then I saw a small pool trapped between the rocks, still and clear. My pulse kicked. Maybe fresh water. I dipped a finger and tasted. Salt. I swore under my breath and kicked a stone into the waves. Farther along, I spotted a narrow crevice glinting with water. I leaned in, thinking maybe, just maybe, this was it. Balancing on a slick ledge, I stretched forward. That's when a wave came out of nowhere, slamming into me like a truck. My footing went out from under me and suddenly I was in the churn, dragged hard toward open water. Salt water blasted up my nose, my arms flailed, lungs screaming. The current was stronger than anything I'd fought before. This is it, I thought. This is how I go. Then, fingers locked around my wrist. I broke the surface gasping and there she was, Mara, her face set, hair plastered to her cheeks. "Lie back," she barked over the roar. "Float. Breathe. Kick slow." Panic kept my mouth shut. I did exactly what she said. She hooked an arm under mine and swam sideways, pulling us clear of the rip. My chest felt like it might explode, but she didn't stop until the water calmed, and then, finally, we hit sand. I collapsed on my side, coughing until my ribs ached. Mara knelt beside me, dripping, and draped her soaked jacket over my shoulders. "You cold?" she asked, brushing my arm as if checking for shivers. No lecture. No, I told you so. Just that quiet question. I shook my head, too embarrassed to answer. My face burned, and not from the salt. I'd been a fool and she'd saved me. Again. She scanned the horizon, then looked back down at me. "We do this together, Noah. Or we don't." Her voice wasn't angry, just matter of fact. I nodded, still catching my breath, and pushed myself upright. "Okay," I said, my voice rough. "Together." Without another word, we split the work. Mara headed inland, saying she'd look for signs of fresh water, green leaves, bird calls, insects, things I wouldn't have thought about. I stayed along the beach, collecting driftwood and bits of debris to use for shelter. I found some palm fronds and a torn scrap of tarp, probably from the boat, and built a crude lean-to against a cluster of rocks. It was ugly, sticks tied with strips of plastic barely enough to block the wind, but it was something. The whole time my hands shook, not from cold, but from the memory of her diving in after me without a second's hesitation. By afternoon, I'd laid out an SOS in big coral rocks on the sand, big enough to be seen from the air. Every few minutes, I'd glance up at the sky, listening for the faint hum of a plane or helicopter. Nothing. Nothing came. Mara returned with her shoes muddy, holding another coconut shell half filled with water. "Found a trickle," she said. "Not much, but it's clean." I marked the path with shells. I nodded, impressed despite myself. She'd thought of everything. I tried signaling using a whistle I'd found in my pocket, a cheap thing from my keychain. I blew 3 short, 3 long, 3 short, just like I'd seen in movies. Mara watched, then pulled out her own, an old metal whistle she'd kept on her. We took turns, our sharp blasts cutting into the quiet. Nothing. Just wind and waves. As the sun sank, painting the sky in streaks of orange, I watched her. Mara sat by the fire, hair a tangled mess, face lined with fatigue but steady. She broke sticks with practiced hands, feeding the flames with careful precision. Not the aloof neighbor I'd pegged her as. Not cold. She was steady, capable, the kind of person who didn't crumble when everything fell apart. I realized I'd misjudged her, and the thought stung more than the salt in my cuts. She caught me staring and held out half a mango she'd found washed up, probably from the boat's bar. "Eat," she said, her voice quiet but certain. I took it, our fingers brushing for just a moment. I hadn't trusted her before, not really. I thought she was just another person barking orders. But now, watching her move, watching her keep us alive, I trusted her. Not because she said the right things, but because she acted like someone who wasn't going to give up. I bit into the mango, juice sharp on my tongue, and looked at her across the fire. For the first time, I was grateful she was here. Not just because she'd saved me, twice, but because, somehow, I knew we stood a chance as long as we stuck together. The morning after she dragged me out of the rip current, we got to work. No talk about what had happened. Just a quiet agreement. We were in this together. The lean-to I'd slapped together yesterday was pathetic. Some sticks and a torn scrap of tarp that wouldn't hold up in a real storm. Mara pointed at it, shaking her head. "That won't do," she said. "We need something solid." This time I didn't argue. She was right. We decided on an A-frame shelter, high enough to keep us dry, sturdy enough to take the wind. I hauled palm logs and driftwood into a rough triangle while Mara wove fronds and vines to lash it together. Her hands moved quick, methodical, like she'd done this before or had at least played the steps over in her head. I dug a shallow trench around the base to divert water and layered the floor with dry leaves to keep us off the sand. It wasn't pretty, but it felt like progress. Water was next. The coconut shell from yesterday was empty, and my throat was already raw. Mara had an idea. Use a sheet of plastic from the boat's wreckage as a tarp to catch morning dew. We angled it over a stick frame so the droplets ran into a cracked bottle we'd found. She also showed me how to make a solar still. Dig a shallow pit, stretch plastic across it, drop a stone in the middle, and set a container underneath to catch condensation. The first 2 tries gave us nothing but dirt. On the third, a few precious drops glistened at the bottom of the bottle. I laughed, part relief, part disbelief. "You're a genius." She just shrugged, swiping sweat from her brow. "Just practical." Mara was full of those kinds of tricks. She showed me how to spot snake tracks, faint, wavy lines in the sand, and told me to tap the ground with a stick before stepping into tall grass. "They'll slither off if they hear you," she said. She warned me about brushing against coral, too. Some kinds could slice you open like glass. I listened. Really listened. I was starting to see her differently, not as the distant neighbor from 3B, but as someone who knew how to survive. Food was harder. Mara taught me how to trap sand crabs with mango bait and sharpened sticks. We turned over rocks at low tide, checking for shellfish. "If it's sealed tight, it's usually safe," she said, prying one open with a salvaged knife. Her hands moved with quick, practiced confidence, a faint scar running across one knuckle. How many storms has she been through already? I wondered. Not just the kind of wounds you can point to, but the ones that stay hidden deep under the skin. I'd gotten better at tending the fire too. Found a piece of driftwood, half rotten but with a dry heart that caught flame easily. The smoke stung my eyes and made them water, but I kept at it until the fire burned steady. Maya nodded in quiet approval, adding her own sticks to the flames. We didn't need to talk while we worked. It wasn't an awkward silence, just a rhythm we'd fallen into, each of us somehow knowing what the other needed without saying it. That afternoon the sky thickened, heavy with unspoken warnings. The air felt tight like it was holding its breath. I was reinforcing the roof of our shelter when the first drops hit, fat ones that landed like tiny stones. Moments later the clouds tore open, and rain hammered down in sheets, driven sideways by a wind that howled through the palms. The shelter held, but only barely. We bolted for cover, ducking under a massive breadfruit tree with a canopy dense enough to keep most of the rain off. Its trunk was wide, but we had to press close to each other to stay dry. My teeth rattled, the cold burrowing deep into my bones. Maya was shivering too, her arms wrapped tight around her torso. "Share heat," she said, her voice cutting through the roar of the storm. She caught my arm and pulled me in until our shoulders touched. I froze for a moment, startled, then leaned in. Our wet clothes clung, but her warmth seeped through, steadying me. We stayed there, huddled against the trunk, the storm thrashing around us. And with nowhere to be, we finally talked, really talked. Not about catching food or keeping the fire alive, but about the lives we'd left behind. Maya spoke first, her voice low, almost eaten by the rain. "My marriage, it wasn't bad in the beginning," she said, eyes on the mud between us. "But after a while he just stopped seeing me. We shared a house, but I was still alone. After the divorce, I moved into that little flat on Gold Street. Sometimes it's so quiet it feels like the walls are screaming." She twisted a leaf in her fingers. "I go down to the harbor just to drown it out." I didn't know what to say at first. I'd never heard her sound that bare before. "Yeah," I said finally, my voice rough. "I get that. My folks always called me a failure. Said I'd never make anything of myself because I didn't go to college, didn't have a plan. I push back at anyone telling me what to do, 'cause I'm scared they're right." I looked out at the rain instead of her. "Guess that's why I was such an ass to you yesterday." She didn't answer right away. Just let it sit. Then she said softly, "You're not a failure, Joel. You're here. You're trying." It landed heavier than I expected. I swallowed hard and nodded. We sat like that for a while. The rain kept falling, the wind rattling the leaves. A small bird, soaked and miserable, hopped under the tree for shelter. Maya gave it a tiny smile, the kind that felt real, and I couldn't help but smile back. It wasn't romantic, not exactly. It was just human. Two people in the same wreck, finding a piece of calm in the noise. When the storm eased, the air was cooler and the sky bled pink where the clouds broke. We crawled out, soaked but in one piece. Maya brushed the leaves from her knees and glanced at me. "We'll be fine," she said, her hand brushing my shoulder, light but deliberate. The touch lingered like a quiet promise we didn't need to name. I looked at her properly as we walked back. Her hair was wild, her face streaked with dirt, but her eyes were steady. She wasn't just the neighbor who once left notes on my door. She was someone who'd faced her own storms and kept walking. That moment was the first time I felt we weren't just two strangers thrown together. We could trust each other, not just to make it through the day but to be real. I didn't say it out loud, but as we rebuilt the fire I thought it. I didn't trust her at first, but I trust the way she moves. She handed me another slice of guava, her fingers brushing mine again. "Eat," she said. This time it felt different. I took it, and for the first time I let myself believe we'd get through this. Not just because we had to, but because we had each other. Life here fell into a rhythm, like a song you don't notice yourself humming until it's stuck in your head. Mornings we checked the crab traps Maya had taught me to set, sharp sticks baited with fruit scraps wedged under rocks. If we were lucky we'd haul in one or two small crabs, their claws snapping, and she'd smile like we'd hit the jackpot. By noon I was on the shelter's roof, reinforcing it with extra fronds to fend off the sun. Maya spread leaves out to dry, turning them into plates or bedding. In the afternoons we stacked damp wood to make smoke signals, hoping a ship might see them. At night we sat by the fire, counting stars through the canopy. It wasn't much, but it was ours. I learned to build better, adding a windbreak of woven vines to cut the gusts. Maya, though, was a magician with what we had. She split palm leaves with her knife and braided them into a tight, sturdy basket for carrying shellfish. "You're wasting your talents in that little flat," I said once, half joking as she handed me the finished basket. She smirked. "You're not wrong." Those moments started to mean something. One evening we climbed onto a jagged bluff that overlooked the ocean, the sky deepening to violet as the sun slid into the water. We sat close but not touching, just watching the line where sea met sky. The waves were gentler than usual, lapping in a slow rhythm below. "It's calmer here," Mara said softly. "But it doesn't feel lonely." I glanced at her, her profile sharp in the fading light, and nodded. Our eyes caught and held, neither of us looking away. It wasn't dramatic like in the movies, but it was weighted, a silent exchange that said more than we could. Then came the accident. It was late morning, and Mara was shifting stones to reset a fish trap. I was a few yards off, stacking firewood, when I heard her sharp intake of breath. I turned and saw her gripping her ankle, blood darkening between her fingers. A jagged shard of coral had sliced just above her heel, not deep but gritty with sand embedded in the wound. My stomach lurched. "Mara, sit," I said, rushing over. She waved me off, trying to stand. "It's fine. Just a scratch." "It's not fine," I said, sharper than I meant. I grabbed the water bottle, boiled water over the fire, then cooled it enough to rinse the cut. The bleeding was slow but steady. I used the fire smoke to drive off flies, then tore a strip from my shirt to bind her ankle. My hands shook as I tied it, not from the blood but from the pale, tight set of her jaw as she pretended it didn't hurt. "You need to rest," I told her, voice tight. "No moving." She ignored me, hobbling toward the basket of shellfish she'd been hauling. "I can still help," she insisted. "We don't have time for me to sit out." I stepped in front of her. "Mara, stop. You'll make it worse." Her eyes flared, not angry, just stubborn. "I won't be a burden, Nathan." The words hit hard. I saw it then, it wasn't about the injury. It was about her, about the weight she carried from before, from all the things she'd confessed under the banyan tree in the rain. "You're not a burden," I said louder than I'd planned. "You've kept us alive. You've saved me more than once. But you don't have to be strong every damn second. You can lean on me for once." The air thickened between us. She didn't argue this time. Instead, Mara stepped closer, then closer still, until her forehead rested against my shoulder. Her breath was warm against my collarbone, her body close but not clinging. I froze, then stayed still, letting her find steadiness there. Our breathing slowed until it matched, steady like the waves. The palms whispered in the wind, the fire crackled nearby, but the rest of the world fell away. When she pulled back, her eyes were clear, lighter somehow. "Thank you," she murmured, so quietly I almost missed it. "For trusting me," I replied just as softly. She smiled, not cautious, not guarded, just real. We went back to work at a slower pace. I carried the basket despite her protests, and she limped behind me, directing where to set it. The wound wasn't as bad as I'd feared, but I kept watch anyway. She let me, which felt like a small victory. That night the air was cooler, the stars bright above. Mara leaned back against a log, her bandaged ankle stretched out. I handed her a roasted crab. She took it, her fingers brushing mine. The basket she'd woven sat between us, full from the day's work. My torn shirt peeked from under her pant leg, now a makeshift bandage. We didn't speak about the moment earlier, but it lingered in the way she looked at me, and the way I didn't look away. I thought about her life before, the empty apartment, the long nights, the quiet ways she reached out to people. I thought about mine, always resisting, always running from the mold others tried to fit me into. And now here we were, not just surviving but finding a rhythm that felt right. I didn't say it out loud, but as I watched her eat, her hands steady despite everything, I knew I didn't want us, to end when we finally left this island. The days after her injury fell into a quiet rhythm, but something had shifted. We worked in sync, shared silences that felt full, not empty. Her ankle was mending, though sometimes I caught her wincing when she thought I wasn't looking. It was just past midday when I heard it, a low, distant hum. I froze, arms full of palm fronds. Mara's head snapped up from the basket she was weaving. You hear that? She asked. I nodded and we both turned toward the horizon. A tiny speck shimmered against the blue, a helicopter. My chest tightened, part relief, part something else I didn't want to name. Smoke, now, Mara said, already moving. We threw the damp wood we'd kept for signals onto the fire. Thick white smoke rose, curling into the bright sky. I tore off my shirt and waved it like a flag while Mara blew her whistle, sharp and urgent. 3 short blasts, 3 long, 3 short. I shoved a stick into the sand, tying a scrap of tarp to it and letting it snap in the wind. My arms ached, my throat raw from shouting even though I knew no one could hear. Mara stood beside me, her jaw tight, blowing on the whistle until she was out of breath. The helicopter banked toward us, nose dipping. I grabbed Mara's arm without thinking, my pulse racing. They see us, I murmured, almost to myself. The rotors roared louder, whipping sand into our faces as it hovered lower. A rope uncoiled and a rescuer in an orange vest slid down, signaling for us to stay put. Mara limped forward, her ankle still tender, and a wave surged in, knocking her off balance. I caught her, my arm wrapping around her waist, pulling her back. Share heat, I said, quiet enough that only she could hear, echoing that moment beneath the leaning palm. Her eyes softened. She nodded. It had become our code, our way of saying we'd get through. The rescue was quick but messy. The rescuer's voice battled the wind, asking if we were hurt, if anyone else was with us. We shook our heads and climbed the rope one at a time, Mara first, me right behind. Inside the chopper, everything was noise, rotors, radio chatter, the creak of metal under strain. We sat across from each other, strapped in, our hands finding each other's for a heartbeat longer than necessary. No words. Just a grip that said what we couldn't. Her fingers were warm, steady, and I held on until the rescuer signaled to let go. Back in Harborside, the air felt wrong. The stink of diesel, salt, and old asphalt hit me as I stepped off onto a makeshift landing zone by the pier. Mara and I were checked by medics, handed water and blankets, and bombarded with questions about the capsized ferry, the squall, the little island we'd washed up on. We rode in silence back to our building. Same chipped paint, same flickering hallway lights. Everything looked the same, but it wasn't. The first time we saw each other again was in the hallway 2 days later. I was hauling groceries, she was checking her mail. Hey, I said, awkward. She gave a small, guarded smile. Hey, and turned back to her door. It felt like we were strangers again. I stood there, keys in hand, feeling the weight of the island between us. We'd survived together, shared heat, shared truths. But here, under harsh fluorescent light, we didn't know how to start again. I buried myself in work, extra shifts, late nights, anything to avoid the stillness of my apartment. But she stayed in my head. Her steady hands, the shrill whistle, the way she'd leaned into my shoulder. I never knocked. Didn't know what to say. Then one night, a knock woke me. 2 quick raps, then one more, almost like a code. I opened the door. Mara stood there, hair damp from a shower, in a loose sweater and jeans. In her hands, a small paper bag. Found this at the market, she said softly. Thought it might, remind you. Inside, dried mango. Just like the ones we'd eaten under the tree on the island. I laughed. A startled, stupid sound. You're kidding. She smiled. Not guarded. Not careful. Just Mara, the way she'd been by the fire, on the rocks, under the rain. Come in, I said. She hesitated, then stepped past me, her shoulder brushing mine. We didn't sit, just stood in the small kitchen, the bag between us. The air smelled like coffee and dish soap, nothing like salt and smoke, but it still felt right, like we'd brought something of that place back with us. I didn't know how to do this, she said, leaning on the counter. Back here, it's different. The island made things simple. I nodded. Yeah. No hallways, no neighbors complaining about my car. She laughed, small but enough to break the tension. I keep thinking about it, I said, the words spilling out. The fire, the rain, you pulling me from the surf. I didn't know you before, Mara. I thought you were cold. But you're not. You're the strongest person I've ever met. I stopped, embarrassed, but she didn't look away. You're not so bad yourself, she said, her voice low. You didn't give up, even when you wanted to. That's not nothing. She reached out, her fingers brushing the bag of fruit, then looked up. I don't know what this is, Mason. But I don't want to go back to just nodding in the hallway. Me neither, I said, quicker than I meant to. I don't know what it is either, but I know I want you in my life. Not just as the neighbor in 5C. My voice cracked and I laughed at myself, rubbing the back of my neck. God, that sounds cheesy. She smiled again, wider this time. It's not. She stepped closer, Not touching, just close enough that I could feel her presence, like the slow warmth of a campfire on a cold night. Let's figure it out. Slowly I nodded, relief flooding me. Slowly works. We stood there, the kitchen light casting soft shadows against the peeling plaster walls. It wasn't the cove, but it was enough. Somehow, getting stranded was how we found each other. The silence wasn't heavy anymore. It was warm, like the driftwood fire we'd built, like the heat we'd shared. Lena tapped the counter twice, then once more. 3 short, 3 long, 3 short. Our signal. I grinned and she did too. We didn't need to say more. The bag of dried mango sat on the counter, a small piece of that wild, wind-battered shore tucked into this narrow apartment. The light flickered. The walls hummed with the building's quiet, but for the first time, the silence didn't feel like emptiness. It felt like home.